Get ready to have your circuits fried. Today, we're diving into a question that's going to really make you think. What could possibly be beyond quantum computing?
We're talking about venturing past the world of qubits and all that quantum weirdness you've been exploring.
Right, we're throwing open the doors to see what might come next.
And to do that, we're diving into a talk by one of the most brilliant minds in quantum computing, Scott Aaronson.
Definitely. And this is just some dry lecture either.
Oh, no, not at all.
Aaronson, he opens the floor to a total free-for-all, a physics free-for-all, as he puts it.
He takes questions, no holds barred, and trust me, some of these questions are like straight out of science fiction.
Wild, right? But here's the thing. Thinking about these what-ifs, even the ones that seem totally out there, can teach us some pretty amazing things about what computation even is.
Exactly, it gets to the core of it.
So let's dive right into the deep end here. One of the first big questions Aaronson tackles is quantum computing the be-all and end-all? Like, have we hit the absolute ceiling of computational power?
Now, Aaronson, being Aaronson, doesn't just give a simple yes or no. He throws out this really interesting analogy instead. He asks us to imagine we're back in the days when everyone thought the Earth was flat.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Then boom, we discover the Earth is round, right? Total game changer. But just because we had this massive shift, it doesn't mean the Earth is suddenly a Klein bottle.
Okay, gotta admit I had to look that one up.
A Klein bottle.
Yeah. For anyone who's wondering, it's this super weird shape, only has one side, like you can travel all over it without ever hitting an edge.
Right, exactly. And Aaronson's point is that just because quantum mechanics was this huge leap forward, doesn't mean there's some even weirder model of computation lurking out there.
So quantum mechanics, it might be like discovering the Earth is round.
Yeah.
It's this big change that reveals how things really are.
Yeah, you could think about it like that.
So we're not saying there isn't something beyond quantum, but it could be the most, I don't know, like the most elegant and complete picture we've got.
For now.
For now, at least.
But then there are these little clues out there, hints that maybe, just maybe, there's more to the story. And one of the biggest clues comes from a place even weirder than the quantum realm. Black holes.
Ah, yes, the black hole information paradox. One of those things that makes you really question what you think you know about, well, everything. Like, physics decided to write a mystery novel. And even the smartest scientists are still trying to figure out the ending.
Uh-huh. That's a good way to put it.
So what is the paradox, anyway? Hit us with the cosmic mystery.
Okay, so picture this. You're falling into a black hole. Not exactly a relaxing vacation, I know. But bear with me.
I'm trying.
According to physics as we understand it, every bit of information that makes you, your memories, your love for this very deep dive, it all eventually leaks back out as something called Hawking radiation.
Okay, that makes sense. Like, information can't be destroyed, right? Just scramble beyond recognition.
Right, exactly. But here's the catch. That information, it should also be trapped inside the black hole on its way to that singularity at the center.
Hold on. So which is it? Is there one copy of the information or are there two?
That is the million-dollar question, and it's right to the heart of the paradox.
So we've basically got a cosmic game of hide and seek going on with this information, and it's pushing the very edge of what we thought we knew about how the universe works. So how does Aaronson even begin to approach this kind of brain-twisting puzzle?
Well, he brings up a really interesting point. How would we ever know if there were two copies of the information?
It's like the universe has a sense of humor, you know? Dangles this massive mystery in front of us and then puts it just out of reach.
Exactly. And it gets even wilder. There's been some theoretical work, and I'm talking really theoretical, suggesting that if you actually tried to measure the outside copy of the information, then jumped into the black hole to check for the inside copy, well, you might have a slight problem.
Let me guess. Problem might be putting it lightly.
Let's just say it wouldn't end well. Calculations suggest you'd have to wait an unbelievably long time for that first copy to fully leak out as Hawking radiation.
Okay.
And by then, the second copy, the one inside the black hole, would be long gone, vanished into the singularity.
So it's like there's some kind of cosmic rule in place, something that's stopping you from ever seeing both copies of the information at the same time. Talk about a buzzkill for any black hole explorers out there.
Right.
But in a way, it's kind of a relief, too. It means we don't have to throw out quantum mechanics just yet.
Yeah, quantum mechanics might be safe, for now at least, but just because quantum mechanics might be safe doesn't mean we've figured out all the secrets of computation. What about problems that even quantum computers might not be able to crack? Problems so hard, so complex, that they might just be impossible to solve.
Okay, I think we're about to go even further down this rabbit hole. Let's talk about those problems that would make even a quantum computer sweat. Right after we take a quick break. All right, so before the break, we were heading into some pretty wild territory, talking about problems that could actually stump a quantum computer.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? It's like we're just getting a handle on what these quantum computers can do, and suddenly, bam, we're talking about their limits.
That's like that saying, right? The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Every time we have a breakthrough in computing, it's like from the abacus to our smartphones, we open up these whole new worlds, but we also find these new boundaries.
It's true. Every advancement kind of shines a light on what we still haven't figured out.
So when we talk about those problems that might be beyond even quantum computing, what are we actually talking about? Can you give us an example or something?
Okay, so imagine this. You're trying to pack a moving truck, right? You've got all these boxes, all different shapes and sizes.
Oh, tell me about it. My back is still aching from my last move. It's way harder than it looks.
Exactly. And you want to find the absolute best way to fit them all in, nice and snug. Sounds pretty simple on the surface, right? But as you start adding more and more boxes and those shapes get weirder, the number of different ways you can arrange them, it just explodes. It's this thing called a combinatorial explosion, and it's a nightmare even for the most powerful computers.
So even with a quantum computer, crunching numbers at warp speed, we might still be waiting longer than the universe has existed just to figure out how to pack our moving truck.
Well, I mean, it's not quite that bad. Quantum computers, they can definitely speed things up for some of these kinds of problems, these optimization problems. But there's this whole category of problems. They're called NP-complete problems. And these are the ones where even quantum computers might not be the magic bullet we're hoping for. These are the problems that are super tough to actually solve, but once you have a solution, it's pretty easy to check if it's right.
Oh, okay. I think I'm already getting a headache. Do you have like a real-world example? One of these NP-complete problems.
Sure, imagine you're a scientist, right? And you're trying to design a new drug. To do that, you need to figure out the exact 3D structure of a protein, but these proteins, they can fold up in tons of different ways.
So it's like finding a needle in a haystack,
Yeah.
but the haystack is made of like protein folds and the needle is a cure for some disease.
Exactly. And these NP-complete problems, they pop up all over the place, from figuring out the best way to schedule a million flights to making sure online transactions are secure. They're everywhere.
So even with all the power of quantum computing, it seems like there might still be some limits to what we can compute. Where does that leave us then? It's easy to get lost in all these different categories, like NP-complete, BQP. It's enough to make your head spin.
Yeah, I get it. It can definitely seem like a jumbled mess. But Aaronson, he's great at explaining things. He says, think about it like the periodic table of elements.
The periodic table. Okay.
Yeah, like each of these categories, P, NP, BQP, they're kind of like different elements, each one representing a different way of computing.
So just like the periodic table helps us make sense of all the different elements that make up, well, everything. These categories, they help us understand all the possibilities and the limits of computation.
Precisely. It's all about organizing our knowledge, finding patterns, and even making predictions about what might be possible in the future.
So this isn't just some kind of abstract theoretical exercise.
Not at all. When we understand these categories, even if the names sound a little intimidating, we can actually get some really useful insights into what we can achieve in the real world. It's like knowing all the rules of a game before you even try to play. And speaking of rules, there's one that's got computer scientists really scratching their heads. It's called P versus BPP.
P versus BPP. Okay, that sounds more like some kind of legal battle than like a fundamental question about the universe. What is going on with these two and why should we care?
All right, let's break it down. So imagine you're trying to solve a Sudoku puzzle, right?
Okay, I'm with you.
A P problem, that's one where you can find the solution pretty quickly and you can be absolutely sure you're right.
Okay, so like an easy Sudoku puzzle, I can probably handle that.
Yeah.
But those super hard ones where you're like scribbling possibilities for hours, that's a different story.
Exactly. So those trickier ones, those are kind of like what we call BPP problems. These problems, they involve a bit of randomness, like maybe you're flipping a coin to help you make decisions along the way. And you can usually get to an answer pretty quickly, but you can never be 100% positive that it's the right one.
It's like those multiple choice quizzes, right? Where you can narrow it down to two answers, but you're not really sure which one to pick. You have a 50-50 shot, but you're still taking a gamble.
Perfect analogy. Now, here's the interesting part. This P versus BPP question, it's all about whether we can come up with clever ways to solve those BPP problems, those ones that usually rely on randomness but do it just as fast and just as accurately as those P problems, the ones where we know for sure.
So we're searching for that aha moment where we realize we don't actually need to flip the coin at all, that we can find our way to the right answer with the same kind of speed and certainty as we do when we're solving a straightforward Sudoku.
You got it. And here's the kicker. Researchers have actually been getting pretty good at doing this, at de-randomizing certain types of algorithms. It's like we're steadily chipping away at the need for randomness in computation altogether. We're finding those elegant solutions that are both fast and accurate.
So if we're getting better at this whole de-randomizing thing, does that mean we're getting closer to the ultimate limits of what computers can even do? Like, are we approaching some kind of ceiling where even the smartest people with the best algorithms can't squeeze out any more computational power?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? If we can just find those shortcuts, those really elegant solutions that cut out the randomness, are we basically proving that there's a hard limit to computation, a point we can't go beyond?
It's like when you're working on a puzzle, right? And you've tried every single combination you can think of, but it just won't come together. You start to wonder if there is even a solution or if maybe you've just hit the limit of what you're capable of.
I know exactly what you mean, and that's what's so fascinating about all of this. It's not just about making our algorithms faster or more efficient. It's about understanding the very essence of computation itself. Like, what are the fundamental laws that govern what's possible in the digital world? That's what we're trying to uncover.
Okay, so we've traveled from these mind-bending black holes to these potentially unsolvable problems, and now we're talking about the very limits of computation itself. It's a lot to take in. So what's the main takeaway? What does Aaronson want us to remember as we're navigating this crazy computational landscape?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is this. We're just scratching the surface when it comes to understanding computation. Remember that analogy with the periodic table?
Yeah, with the elements.
Right. Well, we might be living in a computational universe that's just as vast and diverse as the physical one. We've only discovered a few basic elements so far. Who knows what else is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
So we're not at a dead end. We're at the beginning of something massive, something that could change everything.
Exactly. Every new discovery, every new insight we gain about computation opens up a million new possibilities. We're constantly pushing the limits of what we thought was possible.
And hey, maybe someday one of our listeners will be the one to discover a whole new element on that computational periodic table.
Now, wouldn't that be something?
It's enough to make you want to run out, grab a whiteboard, and start scribbling down equations.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's what I love about this field. It's not just some abstract theory. It has the potential to revolutionize everything, from how we develop new medicines to tackling those big global problems. It even changes how we understand reality itself.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it like that.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today. If your brain isn't already buzzing with possibilities, I don't know what will.
It's been great exploring all of this with you.
And to everyone listening, thank you for coming along on this wild ride with us. Keep those minds curious and never stop exploring the edges of what's possible. Until next time.